What I want to illustrate now is the variable arguments in a method. And let's come back to our maths class. Not a math class, a maths class. All right, here I have two add methods that will add they will add exactly two ints, or they will add exactly two doubles. What if I wanted to add an arbitrary number of doubles? How could I do that? Well, one way would be okay, so here I'm saying that this add method, I can pass it 0 or more doubles, and it's going to add them up. Now, as it sits here, I could actually invoke this with 0 arguments. So if I wanted to guarantee that you're adding at least 1, I could add these. Okay, so now I have to call it with at least one of these, and 0 or more other ones. Or I could put 2 in if you wanted. But all right, so let's kind of look at how we do this. Well, first of all, I have one value, and then 0 or more values as an array, in what I'm calling data. So I will define a sum in this case to start with x, and then I want to add all the other ones. And because I'm iterating over I'll do it the old way. Data.length. Now I could have used the for each construct. I'll tell you what, I'll do this for an int, and I'll do it for that, and then I'll return the sum. Okay. So how would I call this? Well, let's go back to our test maths over here. Okay, so we'll keep our old tests. So okay, so look, I have x, y, a, and w, and those are all even though these are ints, I can kind of actually promote them. Okay, so let's add x, y, a, and w. Okay, no red squiggly, so it's happy with that. Okay, so you see how I'm calling it here? Again, I've only defined 2 arguments, but because the second one is a Varargs, then as long as I'm giving it values which are consistent with that, then this first x, I'm calling it x, I could tell you what, just to make it sort of clear, that is, this x has nothing to do with this x. Why? Because, well, what type of variable is x here? Yeah, I mean, its type is an int, but is it instance, class, or local? Those are the only 3 possibilities. Local. Correct. And why is it local? Yeah, its definition is within a method. Whenever you define a variable inside a method, then the only thing it can be is local. Instance and class variables are defined outside of a method but within a class. Okay, so this is a local variable. So as a local variable, what is its scope?
Within the program.
Within the main method where it's defined. Outside of that, it doesn't exist. This x doesn't exist. So over here, now what type of variable is this x? Well, I mean, it's essentially a local variable as well. It's an argument, but arguments act just like a local variable. And so the scope of this x is entirely, like a local variable, is entirely within this method, and outside it doesn't exist. So this x and this x are entirely different. They're completely different. They have nothing to do with each other. That's why here I'm calling it with y instead. It's just to make that absolutely clear. Because it can, if you see the same letter being, the same variable name being called, then you may be under the impression that I have to use the same letter here as I do here, and that's not the case. Anyway, so let's see if this is what this is gonna do, and then the sum of them all is that. All right, and I'm going to do something similar for the int one. Oops, int dot data. Okay. And then I'm going to just use the for each just to. And here's how the for each would look. Int, well, I'll use x in data. Okay, they do the same thing. Again, if you're looping over an entire array, then there are two ways to do it. One is to explicitly call each index and then grab the guy, or this is the quote for each. And it's actually in other languages that use the same construct, they will sometimes literally use the keyword for each. And in this case, they decided to overuse the keyword for. Just sort of as a side note, all of the each language has certain keywords, which means that they have a particular meaning, and so you can't use those in to define a method. I can't define a method called static. I can't define a variable called double. So what NetBeans does, which is kind of nice, is that all of the keywords it shows in blue. So if I see something in blue, then that means it's a keyword. Okay? So let's just add a bunch of things. All right, what's happening here? Here I'm not using the variables. I'm just putting in hard-coded numbers, again, just for the test. And when I run that, there's the int sum. Hopefully it's correct. Let's see, it's 10, yeah. As far as I know, Java does arithmetic correctly. at least on the integer side. When it comes to floating point, we'll talk about that a little bit. Floating point arithmetic is not what you think, and there are some gotchas when it comes to that. But now notice what's happened here. I've called a method called add, exactly the same method, and depending on which set of arguments I give it, it will call one of these four ones. But as a user, what's nice about this, and what this gives me, is the ability to, and this is an example of overloading. This gives me the ability to just have one name that's hopefully a descriptive name. When I say add, I mean that kind of describes what's going on. If I say add and give it a bunch of numbers, then you would expect, hopefully, that what it returns is adding all those numbers together, and that's the case here. So with just a little bit of extra work, I've taken a method like this that will only work for two numbers and made it into methods that will work for any number of numbers, as long as there's at least one.
So I guess you could also do this. So one of the other classes we're working with vectors. So you can make a class that adds essentially a vector and a vector, or you can make the same method. You can add normal numbers, and you can also add vectors.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to, it depends on how you're modeling the vectors. So if in an object-oriented context, if I'm manipulating vectors, I may want to do a number of different things, and so I will probably define something like a vector class that will have its different coordinates.
Okay.
And so but you could do something similar. Let's say I had a Varargs, I would pass it a vector, and then usually there you have coordinate by coordinate adding. So I would have, say, an array of these vectors inside with the Varargs, and I don't know how many there are, but I say, okay, I got a bunch of these vectors, and I can just sort of pass them in like this. Now, you don't necessarily need this. That is, if what I could do is I could replace this Varargs with an actual array of these. And actually the logic inside would be the same. The difference is that a user would then have to create that array and pass that array in. Whereas here I can just sort of type them in. Now, sometimes it's actually easier to do the array, and sometimes it's easier to do this. And in fact, you can overload this again with an actual array. So that's okay. Let me commit this before I. Yeah, for some reason, what I did yesterday, I couldn't. Oops, there. Somehow I lost what I'd done in class yesterday, even though I posted the video, but I couldn't find my code, so I had to watch the video and redo the code. It was